Judiciary Committee has released the entirety of former special counsel Jack Smith's closed-door testimony from earlier this month. The 255-page transcript and 8-plus-hour-long video shows Smith answering questions about his decision to bring charges against the president for allegedly trying to overturn the 2020 election, revealing Smith's plans for a trial and possible additional charges against alleged co-conspirators. Listen.
Our case was built on, frankly, Republicans who put their allegiance to the country before the party. And so the president got information from people he trusted on other issues. He rejected it whenever it didn't fit him staying in office.
Okay, so the White House is in absolute meltdown right now. And what we're about to tell you is going to sound like something out of a political thriller, but this is actually happening in real time. Special Counsel Jack Smith just dropped a massive evidence bombshell that legal experts are saying could lead to something we've never seen in American history: the arrest of a sitting president. We're talking about Donald Trump, who is currently serving as President of the United States in 2026. And the evidence that just came out is so devastating, so comprehensive, and so legally airtight that prosecutors are now seriously discussing whether they can move forward with an indictment and possible arrest, while Trump is still in the Oval Office. This isn't speculation anymore. This isn't partisan wishful thinking. This is a full-blown constitutional crisis that could fundamentally reshape the presidency, the Justice Department, the balance of power between branches of government, and American democracy itself. And here's the thing that nobody in mainstream media is really explaining. The legal mechanisms that could allow this to happen are already in place, the precedents are being set right now, and the political pressure from multiple directions is becoming impossible to ignore. Now, before we get into the details of what this evidence actually shows and why it's different from everything we've seen before, we need to talk about something really important. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. They're either too scared to report the full story, too compromised by corporate interests, or too focused on access to power to tell you what's actually happening behind closed doors. That's why we built US Power Alert to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. We dig into the documents, we talk to sources inside these institutions, we connect the dots that other outlets won't touch, and we bring it all to you without the filter of corporate media gatekeepers. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. We bring the news straight to you every single day, analyzing the power dynamics, the institutional battles, and the real consequences that affect your life. Just hit the subscribe button below to join us. And if you want to support this work and be part of a community that truly cares about the truth, this is your moment. Subscribe and leave your opinion about this story in the comments. We want to know what you think about this unprecedented situation, because this affects all of us, and your voice matters in this conversation. All right, let's get back to the video.
News is developing news, Gary. Obviously, it's very long. We're talking about 8 hours of video, and I know you and your team are still parsing through it, still trying to figure out what stands out. But what do you see so far?
So a lot of it, what we have in here is stuff we knew, because Jack Smith did write hundreds of pages of a final report before he left his post as special counsel. One of the biggest things is that he believed he had enough evidence not only to bring charges and to try, but to convict Donald Trump.
Here's what happened. Jack Smith, who has been serving as special counsel investigating Donald Trump since before the 2024 election, just filed a sealed motion with the federal court in Washington, D.C. And while the motion itself remains under seal, multiple sources with direct knowledge of the filing have told reporters that the evidence package includes new testimony from former White House officials, previously unseen surveillance footage from January 6th, forensic analysis of deleted communications, and what legal experts are calling the most damaging piece of all: contemporaneous recordings of Trump explicitly acknowledging that he knew he had lost the 2020 election and was pursuing plans to overturn the results anyway. We're not talking about circumstantial evidence here. We're not talking about interpretations of his intent or legal theories about what he might have been thinking. We're talking about direct recordings, multiple sources confirm, where Trump is heard discussing with advisors the fact that the election fraud claims were nonsense, that the legal challenges had no merit, but that they needed to keep pushing the narrative anyway to maintain power. This is the smoking gun that prosecutors have been building toward for years. and it goes far beyond anything we saw in the previous indictments. But here's where this becomes massively more complicated than just another Trump legal case. Trump is not a private citizen anymore. He's not even a presidential candidate like he was when these earlier indictments came down. He is the sitting president of the United States. He won the 2024 election. He was inaugurated in January 2025. And as of right now, in 2026, he holds the most powerful office in the world. And the question that is now consuming the entire legal and political establishment is this: can you arrest a sitting president? The Justice Department has long held that you cannot indict a sitting president based on internal memos from the Office of Legal Counsel that argue it would interfere with the president's constitutional duties. But those are just memos. They're not laws. They're not constitutional provisions. They're internal Justice Department policy. And Jack Smith, who is operating with a degree of independence that no special counsel has had in decades, is reportedly preparing to challenge that policy head-on. And this is where things start to unravel. The evidence that Jack Smith has compiled, according to sources familiar with the case, is not just about January 6th. It's about a pattern of criminal conduct that spans multiple years, multiple schemes, and multiple conspiracies to defraud the United States, obstruct justice, and abuse the powers of the presidency. The recordings that have been obtained include conversations from late 2020 and early 2021, where Trump is allegedly heard instructing officials to find votes, to pressure state legislators to ignore their own election results, to use the Justice Department to investigate false claims of fraud, even after being told repeatedly by his own Attorney General that there was no evidence. But the new evidence goes further. It includes testimony from former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, who apparently cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for immunity, detailing meetings where Trump explicitly outlined plans to declare martial law, to use the military to seize voting machines, to invoke emergency powers to suspend the certification of the election. This isn't fringe conspiracy theory stuff anymore. This is coming from people who were in the room, people who took notes, people who recorded conversations, people who kept receipts. Now, the White House is in full damage control mode. Press Secretary is calling this a politically motivated witch hunt. Republican leadership in Congress is scrambling to figure out how to defend a sitting president facing possible arrest. Trump himself has been on Truth Social nonstop, posting that this is the greatest miscarriage of justice in American history, that Jack Smith is a deranged prosecutor working for deep state Democrats, and that he will never allow himself to be arrested while serving as president. But here's the problem. Trump doesn't get to decide whether he can be arrested. That's not how the law works. That's not how the Constitution works. And the institutions that are now moving against him, the federal courts, the special counsel's office, and potentially even members of his own party, who are terrified of being associated with a criminal president, are operating under a different set of rules than Trump seems to believe apply to him. So here's the context you need to understand. The legal question of whether a sitting president can be arrested has never been definitively resolved by the Supreme Court. The Office of Legal Counsel memos that say you can't indict a sitting president were written in 1973 and 2000, during the Nixon and Clinton eras, and they're based on the theory that indicting a president would be too disruptive to the functioning of the executive branch. But here's the thing. Those memos were written in the context of presidents who were generally seen as operating within normal bounds of presidential conduct. Nixon resigned before he could be indicted. Clinton was impeached but not removed, and the criminal investigation into him was paused until he left office. We've never had a situation where a sitting president is facing overwhelming evidence of violent insurrection, of attempting to overthrow an election, of crimes that go to the very heart of whether American democracy can survive. And legal scholars across the spectrum, including some very conservative ones, are now saying that the OLC memos cannot be read to give a president absolute immunity from prosecution for crimes of this magnitude. The Constitution itself is silent on this question. It says the president can be impeached and removed from office, and that after removal, he can then be prosecuted criminally. But it doesn't say that a president cannot be prosecuted while still in office. And here's where this gets into very dangerous territory for Trump. If Jack Smith moves forward with an indictment, and if a federal judge signs an arrest warrant, who is going to carry out that arrest? The U.S. Marshal Service reports to the Justice Department. The FBI reports to the Justice Department. The Secret Service, which protects the president, is part of the Department of Homeland Security, which ultimately reports to the president. So you have a situation where the law enforcement agencies that would normally execute an arrest warrant are either under the control of the person being arrested or are tasked with protecting him. This is uncharted territory. This is a constitutional crisis that makes Watergate look like a minor scandal. And it gets worse. Because Trump is not going quietly. Sources inside the White House say that Trump has been meeting with his legal team and with loyalists in the military and in federal law enforcement to game out scenarios where he simply refuses to comply with any arrest warrant. There is talk, and this is coming from people who have been briefed on these discussions, of Trump claiming that any attempt to arrest him is a coup, that it's an illegal action by a rogue prosecutor, and that he has the authority as commander-in-chief to order his protection detail to resist any arrest attempt. Now, if that sounds insane, that's because it is insane. But we're dealing with a president who has already shown that he is willing to push every boundary, to ignore every norm, and to use every tool at his disposal to stay in power. And the people around him, the ones who are still there after everyone reasonable left in the first term, are true believers. They're not going to tell him no. They're going to figure out how to execute whatever plan he comes up with. Okay, let's break down what this actually means, because this is a lot bigger than just whether Trump gets arrested or not. First, understand that this is fundamentally about whether the rule of law applies to the president. The entire American system is built on the idea that no one is above the law, not even the president. If Trump can commit crimes, massive crimes, crimes that include attempting to overturn an election and inciting violence against the government, and face no legal consequences because he managed to get himself elected president again, then the presidency is no longer a constitutional office. It's a dictatorship with a 4-year term. And that's not hyperbole. That's the actual constitutional stakes here. If the president is immune from prosecution no matter what he does, then there is no check on presidential power except impeachment, and we've already seen that impeachment is a political process that can be blocked by a partisan Congress. Trump was impeached twice. He was never convicted. He's still here. So if the criminal justice system can't touch him either, then what exactly is supposed to stop a president from doing literally anything? Second, this is going to force the Supreme Court to weigh in, and that is absolutely terrifying given the current composition of the court. The Supreme Court has a 6-3 conservative majority, and 3 of those justices were appointed by Trump himself. Now, you might think that means the court will automatically side with Trump, but it's more complicated than that. The conservative justices on the court, particularly the ones who care about their legacy and about the institutional legitimacy of the judiciary, are very aware that if they give Trump a blank check to avoid prosecution, they will be remembered as the court that killed the rule of law in America. Chief Justice John Roberts has spent his entire career trying to protect the court's reputation as being above politics, and he knows that a ruling that says Trump can't be prosecuted while he's president would be seen correctly as a purely political decision. But here's the problem. Roberts doesn't control this court anymore. The 3 Trump appointees, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, along with Alito and Thomas, form a solid 5-vote bloc that has shown repeatedly that they are willing to overturn precedent, to ignore judicial norms, and to rule in ways that favor conservative political outcomes. And Thomas, who has his own ethics scandals involving his wife's role in January 6th activities, should absolutely recuse himself from this case, but almost certainly won't. Third, this is going to blow up the 2026 midterms in ways that nobody can fully predict. We're less than a year away from those elections, and the entire campaign is now going to be about this. Democrats are going to run on the message that Trump is a criminal president who is trying to place himself above the law. Republicans are going to run on the message that Democrats are using the justice system to persecute their political enemies. And the problem is, both messages are going to resonate with their respective bases. The country is already completely polarized. This is going to make it exponentially worse. You're going to see protests, probably violence, definitely a level of political chaos that we haven't seen since the Civil War era. And the outcome of those midterms is going to determine what happens next. If Democrats take back the House, which is very possible given how narrow the Republican majority is right now, Trump will face immediate impeachment again, this time with criminal charges pending. If Republicans hold the House and expand their Senate majority, they will do everything they can to shut down the special counsel investigation, to defund it, to pass laws that retroactively grant Trump immunity, to basically burn down the justice system to protect him. Fourth, this is having massive international ramifications. America's allies are watching this in complete horror. European leaders, who were already deeply uncomfortable with Trump's second term, are now having to grapple with the possibility that their primary security partner, the leader of NATO, the country they depend on for military protection and economic stability, is led by someone who could be arrested for attempting to overthrow democracy. There are reports that several European capitals have been having quiet discussions about what they would do if Trump is actually arrested, if there's a constitutional crisis in Washington, if the U.S. government becomes paralyzed by this fight. And the answers they're coming up with are terrifying. Some are talking about distancing themselves from the U.S., about building independent European defense capabilities, about hedging their bets with China. Others are talking about trying to wait it out, hoping that American institutions hold and that this gets resolved through legal and political processes. But everyone is worried. Because if America descends into constitutional chaos, if the president and the justice system are at war with each other, if there's even a hint of potential violence or military involvement, the entire global order becomes unstable. Fifth, let's talk about what this means economically. Because markets hate uncertainty, and this is uncertainty on a scale that we've never seen before. If there is a serious possibility that the President of the United States could be arrested, if there's a constitutional showdown between the executive branch and the judiciary, if there's any chance that this devolves into violence or a breakdown of governmental functions, investors are going to panic. We've already seen some volatility in the markets as rumors of this evidence dump have started to circulate. But if Jack Smith actually moves forward with an indictment, if a judge actually issues an arrest warrant, if Trump actually tries to resist it, you're going to see capital flight, you're going to see the dollar weaken, you're going to see stock markets crash, not just in the U.S., but globally. Because the U.S. is still the anchor of the global financial system. And if that anchor starts to break loose, everything else gets dragged down with it. Sixth, and this is maybe the most important thing to understand, this is about the next decade of American politics and beyond. If Trump successfully resists arrest, if he uses his presidential powers to shut down this investigation, if he gets away with attempting to overturn an election, then every future president will know that they can do the same thing. The presidency will have been transformed from a constitutionally limited office into something much more dangerous. And it won't just be Trump, it will be whoever comes after him, Democrat or Republican, who will know that there are no real consequences for abusing presidential power as long as you have enough political support. On the other hand, if Trump is actually arrested, if he's actually prosecuted and convicted, even while serving as president, then we will have established a new precedent that no one is above the law, but we will also have gone through a constitutional trauma that could take decades to recover from. There is no good outcome here. There are only degrees of bad. And the path we're on right now is leading to the worst possible version. Now, here's what you need to watch for in the coming days and weeks. First, watch for the special counsel's office to file additional motions that start to lay out the legal argument for why a sitting president can be indicted. They're going to cite scholarly articles. They're going to cite international examples. They're going to argue that the OLC memos are not binding, and that the Constitution itself does not provide immunity for criminal conduct. Second, watch for the White House to escalate its attacks on Jack Smith, on the Justice Department, and on the federal courts. They're going to argue that this is all political, that the timing is designed to interfere with Trump's presidency and with the midterms, and they're going to call for Smith to be fired, or for the investigation to be defunded. Third, watch for Republican leaders in Congress to start making moves. Some of them, the ones who are actually worried about their party being associated with a criminal president, might start to quietly distance themselves from Trump. Others, the MAGA loyalists, are going to go all in on defending him and attacking the justice system. That split in the Republican Party is going to become very clear very quickly. Fourth, watch for the Supreme Court. If this goes to the court, and it almost certainly will, watch for how long they take to make a decision. If they fast-track it, that tells you they understand the urgency and the constitutional stakes. If they slow-walk it, that tells you they're trying to run out the clock, maybe hoping that the political situation changes before they have to make a ruling. Fifth, watch for protests. This is going to bring people into the streets on both sides. Trump supporters are going to see this as a coup attempt and are going to mobilize. Trump opponents are going to see this as justice finally catching up with him and are going to demand that the law be enforced. And law enforcement in cities across the country is already preparing for the possibility of violence. Sixth, watch for international reactions. Pay attention to what European leaders say, what NATO says, What allies in Asia say. If they start to publicly express concerns about American stability, that's a huge deal. It means they're preparing for the possibility that the U.S. is going to be in crisis for a while. And here's the thing that a lot of people aren't talking about, but that you need to understand. This isn't just about Trump. This is about whether American democracy can survive a situation where one of the two major parties has become completely untethered from democratic norms and the rule of law. The Republican Party as it exists right now is not a normal political party. It's a personality cult built around Trump, and it has shown repeatedly that it will defend him no matter what he does, no matter what evidence comes out, no matter what laws he breaks. And that's not sustainable. You cannot have a functioning democracy when one entire party is dedicated to the proposition that their leader is above the law. At some point, something has to break. Either the party breaks, and you see a split between traditional Republicans and MAGA Republicans, or the democratic system itself breaks, and we end up in a place where elections don't really matter anymore because whoever has power will do whatever it takes to keep it. So here's the bottom line. Jack Smith just dropped evidence that, according to multiple legal experts, could lead to the arrest of a sitting president for the first time in American history. The evidence reportedly includes direct recordings of Trump acknowledging that he lost the 2020 election but pursued plans to overturn it anyway, along with testimony from former officials detailing criminal conspiracies that go to the heart of whether American democracy can survive. Trump is not going to go quietly. He's going to resist. He's going to use every tool at his disposal, including his presidential powers, to avoid prosecution. The Supreme Court is going to have to decide whether a sitting president can be indicted and arrested, and that decision is going to shape American law and politics for generations. The 2026 midterms are going to become a referendum on whether Trump should be prosecuted or protected. International allies are panicking about American stability. Markets are going to react with massive volatility if this actually moves forward, and we are potentially heading into the worst constitutional crisis since the Civil War. This story is far from over. In fact, it's just beginning. Keep your eyes on the federal courts. Keep your eyes on Congress. Keep your eyes on the White House, because every move that gets made in the next few weeks is going to be critical. This could define American democracy for the next decade and beyond. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we're going to be covering every single development as it happens, and you need to understand what's really going on here. This isn't just another political scandal. This is existential. And what happens next is going to determine what kind of country America is going to be.